Welcome to the channel, friends. So today's video is going to be covering how to remove a very stubborn wheel bearing or hub from your car. Now, the vehicle I'm working on is my wife's 2019 Subaru Crostrek, and they are notorious for the wheel bearings to rust fuse to the knuckle and to the flange and a dust cover. So it's a huge pain in the ass. It's not an easy project for a beginner. You will need some special tools like this hub buster that I bought, and this is not only the tool you're going to need because this thing is so severely rust fused or rust jacked. There's different names people call it, but basically it's seized inside the knuckle, and it's got the attached like dust cover that's like on this portion of the hub, and then this portion here is going to be inside your knuckle. They're all fused together, it's all rusted, and it's severely like corroded from just, you know, New England salt and New England winters that have a lot of salt and sand and crap. So if you live in like the upper Rust Belt states, you're going to come across this, and it's not an easy thing to do. Like I said, this is not the only tool you're going to need. This will break it loose, but then you're going to have the flange stuck to it. And you're going to need a hydraulic press. This is what I've used in the past for other wheel bearings to push them out of the knuckle because they were so severely fused and stuck on the truck. So I had to cut out the ball bearings, basically remove the whole thing, knuckle and everything, and press them out on this press. So I had to use this to break free the actual dust cover piece that has a smaller flange on it. It's not a lot of surface bearing area, so it's very difficult to do because of the construction of the hub. But let me show you what I have so far. I went ahead and already did one side. This side right here is done. It took me about 4 hours to do. It was kind of a pain in the ass because, you know, I tried to like do it first with the hub buster and using a 5-pound mini sledge. That did not work. You could be there all fucking day banging on that thing and it's not going to work. I had to use a 20-pound sledgehammer, and then once I started using that after about 30 hits, like, you know, 30 hits, and I had to retighten my hardware because it came loose. So every time you hit it with the actual sledgehammer, the hardware will break loose. So what I did was I actually used my own hardware because the stuff that comes with this hub buster is kind of not the greatest hardware, and it wasn't even the right size for this vehicle. So I recommend using like longer bolts, because if you go to the wheel studs on the vehicle, there's not enough thread, and they're fine pitch threads, and that's going to end up stripping out and causing problems, and this is going to become all loose and it's floppy when it's attached, and you're going to constantly have to like tighten it, which I still had to do even with these big honking bolts here. So I recommend replacing the shit that comes with it with some pretty good size hardware in, like, you know, grade 8, grade 10 hardware, thicker stuff. That way you attach directly to the hub flange and not use the stock wheel studs, because they will strip out, which they did. Okay, so this thing worked partially. I'm glad I have it now. It's part of my arsenal. But you will have to, like I said, use a press as well, because this part here, this dust cover, is what's going to cause problems. And I'll show you when I do it on this side. So I went ahead already and removed most of the stuff. So I removed all the brake shoes, all the hardware. In order to remove this nut, you're going to have to, you know, put the wheel on without the center cap in. Then when the car's on the ground, go ahead and loosen this nut. But you actually want to keep it, once you loosen it, tighten it back up just enough so this piece here is still intact, because you don't want this is 2 pieces, the hub itself. So you want this to come out as one piece, not just this front piece, because if you use like a slide hammer or something and you don't have the nut there, the slide hammer will actually remove this front piece, which is not what you want, and then you're going to be stuck with the rest of the hub still attached and frozen to the knuckle, you know, rust jacked and fused. So you want to pull this off all as one unit. Then you can go ahead, once you release it from the knuckle, remove this nut. And, you know, like I said, you're going to have to remove the hardware on the back side, the 4 bolts on the back side of the actual bearing, so that can drop out. So let me get set up, and I'll show you guys the whole process here. It's going to take a lot of hits from the 20-pound sledgehammer. I almost was about to take this whole thing off, like I've done before with my trucks, and put it in the press. And even at that point, it would be very hard because not a lot of good surface area here to put load on the backside. This is all dust cover. There's a small metal steel flange around the hub, and that's it. It's very difficult. So, like I said, let me get set up. I'm going to go through the process, and you know, don't get discouraged, but this is a job for a more advanced home mechanic or, you know, do-it-yourselfer. This is not a job for a novice person or even intermediate. You need to have all the proper tools to pull this thing out. So, with that said, let me get started, and I'll show you guys how to do this second side and get this thing busted out. Alright, so before I get started, I want to mention that you want to bungee tie your brake caliper out of the way so it doesn't fall on top of the area you're working. And also, the wheel speed sensor, very important. Remove this from the top of the knuckle, which is right here. So that will interfere with the axle coming out and moving forward. So as this thing breaks loose, if that is in there, it will shear it off and break your sensor. So very important, take that out of there and put it up out of the way so it's not going to get damaged. And as you can see, I removed all the hardware, removed all the brake caliper bolts, and got everything out of the way. I also went ahead and removed the 4 bolts on the back side of the hub, removed those completely. So now this should break free and fall out once it actually does the once I go ahead and bust this thing with the hub buster. It's gonna just droop down once it finally breaks loose. It's gonna take a lot of work. It's gonna take probably about 30 good hits with a 20-pound sledgehammer, but that's what it takes. This is a severe case of a rust fused wheel bearing. This is actually the worst case I've seen. Like, all the ones on YouTube are they come out a lot easier compared to this one here. So I did the other side. It was a bitch. This side, we'll see. I had it soaking like for a week, so let's see if it comes out any easier. So let me get set up, and I'll show you what the tool looks like and how it works. Alright, so I went ahead and tightened up the bolts. I want to mention that use some very large, strong, thick washers here. I have this massive washer on both sides because what happens is these slots in the tool are so big that if you have a smaller washer, it's going to push right through this hole here, and then you're going to lose force. So you want to get a nice big head, big washer, wide washer to bridge that gap on the tool. The slot there is it has extra play in it because of different hole patterns. I mean, for the wheel studs. So because it compensates for 4, 5, and 6 lug, patterns on different cars, there's so much slop in that slot where these bolts are in. that, like I said, you want to bridge that gap with a nice big washer. But it's ready to go now, as you can see. So you're going to want to essentially hit it from the bottom here. But what I was doing is actually hitting it from the top as well. So I'll do a couple hits from the top, a couple hits from the bottom, and that seemed to work. Oh, that kind of hits right there, but anyways. So let's get started. Let's start pounding on this thing and get this thing loose and get this job done. Make sure you have some ear protection because it is going to be super loud and it will damage your ears. I don't want to be sound like a little bitch or anything, but definitely you're going to be pounding on this thing for a good 20 minutes and your ears are going to be ringing by the time you're done if you don't have these in your head. So let's get started. All right, it's starting to break loose. I can see it just a tiny bit. So we're just going to keep on hitting it. It moved a little bit more. It's almost there. There we go. We finally broke loose. It went a lot easier than the other side, that's for sure. So now we can take this off. The nut size on this is 32 millimeters. And this is a little trick I use to loosen this while it's on the vehicle. Here we go. Just use a pry bar to hold the studs. We can pop this off. So as you can see here, this is where it's fused to the back of the flange. This is still stuck. This is why we have to bring it to the hydraulic press and tap on it. I use the press to hold it, and then I tap on it with the hammer and a big bolt. But this is what you're left with. We're gonna have to clean this all up. Clean this all up as well on this side, and then hit it with sandpaper, clean it up again, and then we're gonna put anti-seize all over this flange, on the inside here, and on the new bearing, and on the inside of this smaller flange on the dust cover. So I'm going to go ahead and start prepping all this and show you the next step. There's a small clip on here that holds on the e-brake cable, so pull off that small clip. That way now you can release this from the dust cover, and now you have the assembly here that we're going to go take in the workshop and press this out now and put the new one back in. Alright, so I'm using the press to hold the bearing down while I tap on the actual flange on the dust cover here. So this is going to push the dust cover down and off that that bearing surface on the bottom side. So it's going to drop free from the bottom. So I'm just going to take the bolt and I'm going to run it through the holes that I have here just to bang it out. Alright, so I can see it to start to break loose here. If you do this by hand and like kind of holding this free hand on the ground, you're not going to get the same force as you are here with this being held firmly in the press. So you can try to bang them out by hand with a 5-pound mini sledge, but I got nowhere with that. I was banging it for like 10 minutes, and I was just hurting my hands because there was no nothing holding the actual bearing in place. And all the force that I was using with the hammer basically was going to waste because I was getting absorbed into my arm. So when you hold it firmly like this, it has nowhere else to go but down. And all the force that you're applying with the hammer is being used to actually break the bond and not anywhere else wasted energy. So that's why I'm doing it this way. I've seen some YouTube videos where this thing will just break right free. You just pop, you know, bang on the back side of the bearing and it breaks loose. But this one is not the case. This is a severe case, and it's, you know, all the typical methods you see are not going to work. So you need to have everything held firmly, and you need a lot of hammer, a lot of sledgehammer. All right, so I got a pretty good gap here now. I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. You don't have much room because this flange is very small. And most of it's dust cover. It's not actual like thick material. So only the parts very close to the flange, sorry, the bearing mount here in the bottom, the base of the bearing, is where it's thick. So be careful you don't like bend the shit out of this thing and like do damage to the dust cover, because you're gonna want to reuse it. So we want to hit that spot and then hit this spot here, and then we should be good to go. And there we go. I think we're loose now. This thing is just so rusted on there. It's like it's almost impossible to get this off just swinging a hammer, you know. All right, it's finally loose. Okay, so let me go ahead now and pop this thing off. There we go. All right, so you can see how small of a flange surface we have to work with. This is all that you have for strength. And it's rusted into this like 1/4 inch lip here. And that's the bearing. It looks like complete crap. Look at that. It's all rust jacked. Just all of it is just not cooperating for an easy disassembly at all. So I'm glad this is out. I'm gonna go ahead now and clean this up. Clean up the other surfaces and apply anti-seize grease to everything that comes in contact with this, and apply it also to this surface here in the flange of the new bearing. All right, so let me get that done, and I'll keep on going and show you guys what that process looks like. Alrighty, guys, so everything's back together, and I went ahead and torqued everything besides the nut, because I have to put the wheel back on. So this nut's going to be 140 foot-pounds, okay, but you have to put the wheel on without the center cap and be able to torque this when the car is on the ground. So that's going to be the very last thing I do. But the caliper mounting bolts, so those bigger bolts for the caliper bracket, those are 80 foot-pounds. And the wheel bearing 4 bolts in the back side here, those are going to be 63 foot-pounds. So those 4 bolts that hold the wheel bearing into the knuckle. And also remember to put this back in here, the speed sensor bolt and sensor, put that back into the knuckle, and it's good to go. Like I said, I cleaned everything up, all those flanges and all those surfaces on the hub and that dust cover, and I applied anti-seize grease to every single surface that comes in contact with the knuckle. So the next person who has this car should not have an issue 100,000 miles from now, hopefully. They usually go before then, but I put anti-seize on everything. We're not going to keep this car that much longer, maybe another year or two, but it's just for the time being, take care of the wheel bearings, because it was an issue, because it sounded like a prop plane, or like a dirt bike driving behind you when you have this issue. The wheel bearings were making a noise, and it was super annoying because it increased with speed, and I guess it's a common issue with Subarus. They have very noisy wheel bearings, even though there's no wobble or shake in the wheel itself when you try to test for it. But that there is the complete install of those bearings. I'll put a link to the tool down below that I used, and a link to the press as well that you can use for this project that's going forward. It's always good to have a shop press anyways, so if you're going to be working on vehicles. But also something that's very important to mention is that you have to stake this after you torque this to 140 foot-pounds. You want to go ahead and stake this on the keyway and push this collar into the keyway. It's very important to do that, otherwise these nuts will back off and you'll have a loose axle and hub. So that's another very important step that needs to be mentioned. Do not skip this step because it will come loose. The last thing I'm going to do is, like I said, go torque this down to 140. The lug nuts are 88 foot-pounds, and that's going to be it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and put the wheels back on and torque everything up, and I hope you guys enjoy this video. So if you have any questions or comments, please place them right down below. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please go ahead and do so. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.